Hello and welcome everybody. Welcome to our 4th annual Disability Summit to mark International Day of Persons with Disabilities, which takes place on the 3rd of December. We're so glad to have you all with us. My name's Carolyn Pepper and I'm the co-chair of Reed Smith's Business Inclusion Group for People with Disabilities. So just to introduce the summit, the themes of this year's summit are representation and allyship. And I think both are really crucial to ensure diversity of thought and progress within organisations and actually in wider society as well. Allyship, I think, is something that we all need to succeed, whether we have a disability or not. But I think in particular, given the slow, though probably accelerating pace of change in relation to disability inclusion, it's all the more important. Whether you have a disability and you're acting as a role model, or you're someone who's passionate about disability inclusion and are creating a path for growth and the success of others, this is all fundamental to removing the barriers that have really stood in the way and prevented a focus on the abilities of people with disabilities and preventing them from moving forward in their careers as they should be doing. Allyship, I think, gives individuals and organisations a significant and unique perspective, really, focusing on finding solutions to attain the right culture and the right mindset. By being proactive and thinking differently and keeping an open mind, we can embrace disability, diversity, inclusion, and we can all become better allies to achieve progress in this area. This summit is really just the beginning of the conversation. It's really a platform and a call to action in this area. And hopefully it'll bring a few more people into the idea of becoming an ally for people with disabilities. We've got really a lot of great content, so I hope you're all looking forward to it as much as I am. I think this is definitely my favourite event of the year. So I'm delighted now to hand over to Stuart Pixley who's going to give our keynote speech. Stuart's been a senior attorney at Microsoft, I think, for 15 years now. And prior to that, he spent 10 years working in large law firms in New York and Silicon Valley, handling complex IP matters and also technology transactions for high-tech and life sciences clients. He's also been deeply involved in disability diversity in the legal field. I mean, just as a run-through of some of the roles Stuart's held, I mean, he's a member and former co-chair of the Washington Attorneys with Disabilities Association. He's the former president and founding board member of the National Association of Attorneys with Disabilities, former commissioner of the ABA Commission on Disability Rights. He served on the Committee for Diversity for the Washington State Bar Association and has also been on Microsoft Legal Affairs Disability Diversity Team, which he started, I think, in 2012. I've been privileged to hear Stuart speak a few times, and he's a frequent panelist at these types of events. So we're really privileged to have him here. He's a fantastic speaker, and really, and just really a fantastic person. So welcome, Stuart. And yeah, absolutely, we'd love to hear what you've got to say.
Thank you, Carolyn, for the gracious introduction, and to Reed Smith and especially David Boucher, Baba Badraka, and Angela Matney for inviting me to participate in Reed Smith's 4th annual Disability Inclusion Summit. This summit is special. It's special not just because of the quality of the programming, and it's excellent as always, nor because of celebration of our community among legal professionals, but really any professionals is rare. And trust me, it is rare. Instead, to me, the Reed Smith Disability Inclusion Summit is special because it is such an impactful elevation of disability representation and allyship, and because for our community, the twin pillars are as uniquely challenging as they are critical and interconnected. Disability representation is people with disabilities being seen, heard, and present. Disability allyship, on the other hand, is how non-disabled people support, advocate, and collaborate with our community to make sure representation happens. Moreover, it is allyship that ensures that those of us who are present are also included and valued, and that we can be present as our true, authentic selves. So you see, we must cultivate both representation and allyship and not favor one to the exclusion of the other. Together, representation and allyship create a culture that respects and empowers people with disabilities and invigorates the institutions that embrace our community. While Reed Smith does both exceptionally well, our community has historically faced unique challenges to effective representation and allyship. But today I am hopeful that technology advances and a broadening commitment to a growth mindset allyship make for a bright future. Now, when I think about our representation, I think of disability as a natural part of human diversity. According to the World Health Organization, more than 1 billion people, or 15% of the world population, live with some form of disability. Disability can affect anyone at any age, in any country, and in any walk of life. Disability can be visible, invisible, permanent, or temporary, congenital or acquired, physical or mental, or a combination of any of these. Moreover, disability intersects with race, gender, sexuality, class, and culture. Put simply, we are your family, your neighbors, your clients, and your colleagues. We are everyone, and we are everywhere. And still, relative to our ubiquity, people with disabilities frequently remain underrepresented and misrepresented in society. In media, if we're seen at all, we are often still portrayed as objects of pity, charity, or inspiration, or perhaps as villains, victims, or burdens. With such a limited, unflattering narrative, it's unsurprising that parents and educators often set lower expectations for students with disabilities decades after mainstreaming was to become the norm. And most daunting for those of us in industry, 30 years after passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act here in the United States, the employment rate of people with disabilities relative to their non-disabled peers has arguably not changed in a meaningful way. Now, admittedly, it is hard to know how many of us there really are. People with invisible disabilities of all types face incredible stigma and are unquestionably undercounted. And for years, it had been considered risky to even measure the incidence of disability in the workplace. Our vulnerability to prejudice and our alleged sensitivity, the very reasons why perhaps we shouldn't even be counted voluntarily. Now, this is changing, but the change is very slow. These cascading effects are as familiar as they are pernicious, and you would be forgiven for thinking it is hopeless, but it is not. Despite a long history of struggles and incremental progress and setbacks, I am more optimistic and hopeful for our future than ever before. Selfishly, as a technology lawyer, I am optimistic because the power of technology today includes the power of artificial intelligence, or AI. Past advances in technologies have certainly reduced obstacles to full and effective participation in the workforce. But what I like about the latest advances is that it is not just another incremental leveling of the field. It can, by orders of magnitude, make it easier for all of us to do the mundane things so many of us struggle with for reasons unrelated to our talent, skill, or character. I kind of like to think of AI is assistive technology for everyone, including the non-disabled. But what's more important is that generative AI is uniquely poised to help access and elevate our own most creative, insightful ideas and expressions, unlocking our most valuable selves. That's why it makes so much sense to me that Microsoft thinks of these technologies as co-pilots, tools that work alongside, amplify, and give us voice. Sounds like we're talking about an ally, does it not? And I think AI can be, if we ensure this ally represents and accounts for people with disabilities in its training sets, algorithms, and interfaces. I'm also optimistic that after the last 4 hard years of COVID, we've been taught that the barriers to workplace representation are perhaps much lower than once thought, because so many job needs are often not as essential as supposed. The need to work from an office, the need to work to meet face to face, or to work from a particular geography, or the need to work certain regular hours. For years, those of us with disabilities were told that these were essential without question, and that accommodation would be risky, unproductive, or unfair. What a difference a pandemic makes. But I'm also optimistic because I believe that representation with roots in a growing true allyship stands the best chance to endure and grow. Historically, efforts to increase disability representation have often been transactional, a performative gesture to reach a quota, to achieve regulatory compliance, generate consumer goodwill. But today, however, I think we have an opportunity to attain a kind of disability representation that results from cultural allyship, a mindful, deliberate desire for change based on curiosity, a striving for cultural competency, and a deep understanding that disability inclusion is powerful for the institution and all of its constituents. This allyship respects that the employer's purpose is not to supply my disabled life with dignity. And my purpose in your workforce is to provide value, not just to supply you or your workers with self-esteem. So why then should disability allyship be challenging? Maybe when you hear the word disability allyship, you think of an awareness campaign or sensitivity training, or perhaps even a disability etiquette guide. Maybe you even recognize that, like other marginalized groups, allies are those who would stand up when they see someone confronted with stereotypes, prejudices, and microaggressions. But let me tell you how much broader allyship has been and can be. For the disability community, our would-be allies have been the parents, caretakers, legislators, and clergy who thought to speak on our behalf. But in so many cases, it was these people who took our voice from us, insisted that we be sheltered, institutionalized, and separated for our own protection. Above all, these allies focused simply on getting us fixed. It's the voice of those allies who motivated others to support us through models of charity based on despair and pity, or who praised us for our bravery in conducting the most mundane tasks of daily living, or for the audacity to be seen in public. So it has been such allies who taught us in the name of protection and sheltering how low our expectations and aspirations should be. So you might say we have some trust issues. It's taken many years of our own advocacy to reach a point where people start to understand that we don't need to be fixed, that it is society and the built environment that has failed us, and that is what needs to be fixed. A point where we begin to recognize that people with disabilities are the experts in their own bodies and lives. A point where many people, including disabled people, begin to appreciate that our rallying cry, nothing about us without us, is essential today because it has been historically dishonored. Having to take so much on ourselves to achieve our own inclusion, readmitting allyship in our community is challenging indeed, but I am hopeful. I am hopeful because today our allies are our colleagues and our companions, not just our caretakers and guardians. I'm hopeful because allyship for the disabled people is, as it should be, the same as any other marginalized group. Non-disabled people using their privilege, power, and position to support, advocate, and collaborate with people with disabilities to advance their rights and their interests. And people are learning that such allyship requires listening to, learning from, and standing with people with disabilities, not speaking for, over, or about them. Such allyship is about recognizing and respecting the agency, autonomy, and expertise of people with disabilities, and not assuming, imposing, or deciding for them. Perhaps most important, disabled and non-disabled people are alike appreciate now that allyship is not about being perfect. It's about being willing to learn, grow, and change. Because of this, I am hopeful because there are now those who would befriend our community with a growth mindset and humble partnership, understanding that the disabled experience has much to teach us all about how we interrelate, how we adapt, and how we can enable each other to reach our full potential. And I think we have a new breed of allies who are willing to make the investment in our inclusion, not merely through technology and accommodations, but through a cultural shift that makes allyship and inclusion a persistent state of mind. Critically, this is because they recognize that disability inclusion is not merely the right thing to do. It is what makes their workforces and their institutions more vibrant, productive, and true to the client, customers, and communities that it serves. So, at this Disability Inclusion Summit, we do celebrate the progress that we've made toward genuine disability representation and allyship over many, many, many years. And let us recognize how well positioned we are today to make so much more progress more quickly than ever before. But most of all, I invite you to engage, to ask questions, and to listen and learn to what each of us can do to create a more inclusive and empowering world for people with disabilities. Thank you, and I hope you make the very most of this year's Disability Inclusion Summit.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Thank you very much. That was really informative, and I think I heard a lot there about listening and learning and how important that is for allyship. I had a question for you, actually, if you don't mind, if you have a minute.
Please.
So I just wondered, how have you felt that things have changed during the course of your career for people with disabilities? Have you seen a really big shift?
I like to think I've seen a big shift, principally in that there's been a merging between, the disability world and the diversity and inclusion world. I think when I started out, disability was often handled as separate or other or things like that, and so the fact that our stories and our needs were really the same in so many ways didn't necessarily come across. I have a story that I tell when I was, when we were running our Washington Attorneys with Disabilities Association, we were approached to give commentary on a plan to do a membership survey. Very interested in how people from marginalized groups were experiencing the profession. The thing that stunned us was that for all other groups, you got the kind of questions you might expect about access to opportunities, mentorships, career progress, career velocity, those sorts of things. When it came to people with disabilities, they really only asked a few questions. Number one, do you have a disability as defined by Section 2 or whatever of the American with Disabilities Act? I'm a lawyer. I don't know what the definition of disability is according to that. Secondly, have you ever asked for an accommodation? And then lastly, was that accommodation granted? And I think, and it's well intentioned, but it goes to show how myopically we have been thinking about disability and how we've been approaching a disability inclusion from frankly, a regulatory framework. All these things were asked from the context of the American with Disabilities Act. Presume you have something similar to that. But what they missed was that we are on the outside because of prejudice and other sorts of things. Our ability to interact with others. It's this very, very same story that you hear. We've definitely got our own twist to this, but the fundamental needs of people who are marginalized are often more similar than they are different. And I think recognizing that has enabled, frankly, people with disabilities to come into the diversity tent. And I think that's powerful.
No, thank you very much, Stuart. I don't know if there's any questions popping up on the side. If anyone has any questions,
I actually had one for Stuart, if I may. Stuart, you spoke about learning and collaboration, and as you know, the panels are going to talk about AI and sector focus on representation and CSR. But I wanted to understand from you, what is that form of learning and collaboration that you see? What form should that learning and collaboration take, not only now, but also in the future?
Interesting. So what form should our learning take? And I think, frankly, it should take all forms. And I think he did a nice job of sort of talking about the different ways in which, folks are going to be able to exercise allyship, in the various segments in our summit. And I think that's exactly right. The number one thing is you've got to talk to people with disabilities. And it's even better if you get to talk to us one-on-one, that for sure. It's fantastic when you get to interact with our whole community. Some of the opportunities through pro bono and CSR do exactly that sort of thing. And I think there are, the nice thing about social media and other stuff is you are now going to get a greater opportunity to experience a wider variety of folks. So there is not one single source for learning, but it's recognizing that it's all around you. Those opportunities are all around you.
thank you, Stuart. I know that David has a burning question, but is there any? I don't know if there's any more on the screen, but I might let David go ahead if there isn't any you can see.
I'm not sure it's a burning question, but anyway, Stuart, thanks again for participating. It was a great keynote speech, and a lot to think about. I'm very interested in so many aspects of what you said, and particularly, collaboration of people with disabilities, without disabilities. I think one of the things that I've been struck by is, the lack of people with disabilities in positions of leadership across industry. I think a number of the statistics are moving in the right direction in terms of employment, but I'm just curious as to whether you've got any thoughts as to why we're not getting more people with disabilities into leadership positions in industry, because I think that as you rightly say, things are changing, but slowly, improving, but slowly. But I suspect that will make a big impact if we could get more people with disabilities into positions of leadership.
It's 100% true. I think there's two aspects to it. First part is just like every other barrier, every other level that you would see to, you are dealing with people who look a lot like each other and less like you. And I think that we are simply not yet used to seeing the vision of people like me or others, who are in higher positions. It takes a while. But the question is, then what do you do about that? And I'm a strong believer, and I don't know how popular it is, it's just my opinion. We have to start cultivating talent. Have to start recognizing the folks that are talented, that have a chance to represent the community. And there's a lot of us who, frankly, through educational accidents and all other sorts of stuff, may lack or need brushing up on the soft skills that make those things really real possibilities. But we definitely need cultivation. We also need, as anyone does, you need your champions and your, and people like that who are going to help out. But going back to square one, some of those things have to be deliberate. In order to kick that flywheel over, it has to be deliberate, it has to be thoughtful. I have to decide that we want to have some of those results be sort of outcome oriented. But I think we can do it. And the key is there's no shortage of talent. No shortage of talent. We haven't been looking for it. We need to look for it. We need to grow it in the right ways, and we need to be deliberate about getting it where it needs to go.
Thanks very much, Stuart. I think we're now going to go to our video just before our next panel, which is a video that's been recorded by Mark Goldstein, who is one of our labour and employment partners and also the chair of our mental health task force. So I think we'll run with that video now, if we could, please.
That sounds great. And, wasn't sure, but more than happy to turn all of that over to Angela Matney, who's put together a fantastic panel to kick off our allyship panel.
Thanks both. And I think we do have that video now from Mark Goldstein to kind of set the stage for this conversation we're about to have about generative AI.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Goldstein. I'm a partner in Reed Smith's Labor and Employment Group based out of our New York City office. I'm a member of Leaders and the partner chair of Reed Smith's Mental Health Task Force. Evolution and progression of artificial intelligence has rapidly become one of the main drivers to facilitate representation, equity, and diversity. New technologies leveraging generative AI have the potential for life-changing impact for people with disabilities. At the same time, however, these technologies can potentially perpetuate bias that prevents an open mindset and focus on ability. So how can we leverage the promise that generative AI holds for people with disabilities while also addressing the related challenges from a legal and a security perspective? How can representation in the design process help ensure that new technologies are friends rather than foes? Regulation may need to adapt to keep pace with technology while also providing the framework to further its development. The debate surrounding AI concerns classic, yet contrasting aspects, both of which need to be addressed in equal measure, especially in the context of people with disabilities.
So there you go. That is a little preview of this panel, and my hope is that this is going to be a conversation that we all will kind of engage in about some of these issues. So I'm Angie Matney. I am counsel in Reed Smith's DC office. My practice area focuses on digital health, data privacy, and digital accessibility. And my co-moderator for this panel is Jonathan Andrews, who's in London and is in our entertainment and media group. And I will give you a little bit of information about the panelists. Stuart is going to stick around for this conversation as well. And thank you, Stuart, for that wonderful keynote address. Also joining us, we have Hector Minto, Lead Technology Evangelist, Accessibility, Director, Microsoft. And so Hector has worked at the cutting edge of accessibility and assistive technology for over 25 years. He has held roles in enterprise, from innovative startups to established edtech and health industry-focused businesses, regularly contributing to global consultations on disability inclusion. In his role at Microsoft as lead technology evangelist, Hector leads global teams engaging in their regions with governments, major employers, Microsoft's commercial partners, partner network, and a wider set of community stakeholders to showcase inclusive design, product accessibility, inclusive hiring practices, the role of disability employee resource groups, and accessibility innovation. Hector is the current UK government Disability and Access Ambassador for the tech sector and websites supporting the tech sector to deliver on disability employment and inclusive customer and product experiences. Monique Nikki Bhargava is a partner in our entertainment and media industry group. Her practice focuses on the convergence of advertising and emerging technologies, and she helps clients navigate advertising and privacy issues in new media, digital marketing and content, social media, ad tech, and martech. She supports consumer brands, advertising agencies, publishers, media and technology companies in all aspects of their advertising, marketing, and media initiatives as they innovate to drive consumer engagement. And we also have with us David Boucher. He's a senior corporate partner at Reed Smith in our London office with wide experience in all areas of mergers and acquisitions. Previously, David was the global chair of Reed Smith's business and finance department. He's also a member of the firm's global ESG practice and has a particular focus on the social and government aspects of ESG. He is a founding trustee and secretary of the global children's charity Their World, a director of the Global Business Coalition for Education, and represents the private sector on the board of the Global Partnership for Education, which is a US $5 billion fund within the World Bank, supporting education in over 65 developing countries. So with all of that, thought I would start us out with a question, and I'm going to maybe ask Hector if he'd like to start the discussion on this topic. So our first topic for consideration is we're going to talk a little bit about traditional AI versus generative AI. And of course, we all see many stories these days about generative AI, the potential it brings, as well as worries about pitfalls that it may involve. And we're going to try to consider some of the issues that we all hear about generative AI, but from the lens of what does this mean for people with disabilities. So to that end, Hector, if you want to kick us off, we can describe how AI has traditionally been used to enhance accessibility for individuals with disabilities, and how is the advent of generative AI changing this landscape?
Thanks, Andy, and thanks to the team for putting this great event together. So look, AI's been built into our products now for a number of years at Microsoft, and people with disabilities have been driving that adoption of AI into the products. So to give you a couple of easy examples to think about, the captions in a Teams meeting, that's speech to text. That's AI in action. The image descriptions that go into emails, you drop a picture into an email now, we will use cognitive services in the cloud to essentially put some kind of description on that image to routinely label images for people who are blind using screen readers to have that described. Essentially, as soon as the cloud and AI came into being, people with disabilities were already thinking about how they were going to apply those new set of tools, those cognitive services, into their lives. But we've been on quite a learning journey in terms of like, what did people actually want? And I think it's really interesting just to sort of step back almost a few years and think that through. If you put an image into an email, AI will describe it for you, but it doesn't necessarily understand the context of that image. It doesn't understand what you want to describe in the way that you're conveying that image forward. Man wearing blue suit, red tie isn't necessarily a useful description when you're trying to name that person and, you know, show why you're showing that image in that email or in that program for an event. And so it's been useful to get some automated descriptions into emails and things and documents for people who are blind, but the process of how we've implemented it into our products has changed. So first of all, we used to kind of just do it in the background, and nobody really was involved in the authoring of that process. Over time, our designers and our teams and the feedback from the community was, well, this isn't as useful as it needs to be. How do we get people to actually put useful descriptions in? So we brought the human into the process by bringing the automated description to the front. And then what happens is, more and more that people change those descriptions in those pictures, you're feeding the model. You know, you're actually starting to lead to kind of more useful descriptions. Where generative AI is going to come to play is that, like, suddenly we're kind of ramp up the usefulness of those image descriptions. They're going to be contextual. They're going to know the email that they're being placed in. They're going to know the relationship of the object to the other object in the photo and start describing, you know, their, you know, more contextual best guess as to kind of what those images are. So I think it's useful to go back and say, people with disabilities have known that cognitive services are going to start driving these experiences, you know, give them more experiences. And I think you described it brilliantly, Stuart, at the start. An ally, you know, it's like an automated ally as a sort, you know, that's gonna support. As we move into this next generation of generative AI, those experiences need to have people with disabilities at the foundation, telling us what is useful and what is not useful. And we will be releasing a video as part of International Day of Persons with Disabilities describing these early first experiences of colleagues at Microsoft using generative AI and what they're discovering. I guess the kind of the guardrails that we need to start thinking about very early in all this is making sure that these tools are useful. You know, it might sound like a crazy thing to say, but I always joke, Stuart, and I loved what you were saying a minute ago. When people say to me, what is assistive technology? I always ask them, what's non-assistive technology? You know, like all technologies meant to assist us as human beings. Accessibility or assistive technology with the lens of disability is just more diverse assistive technology. And what we need to start doing is creating these mainstream Gen AI experiences, but at the outset, saying they need to be inclusive of gender, race, disability. The data that's fed in and feeding these experiences needs to have people with disabilities and other protected characteristics telling us, is this useful? Is this dangerous? What is the language saying? You know, all of these guardrails need to be in place. And the developers need to be setting up those early feedback loops in everything they build to make sure that the experiences are what we want them to be.
Thank you, Hector. That is, you know, those are a lot of thought-provoking points that you just made, in particular, making sure that the technologies do what we want them to do. I want to continue this conversation a little bit and then advance to our next question. But first, I want to take a brief pause, and I believe we have our second video that demonstrates, we're gonna have a couple of examples of generative AI in action, and one is a video that will demonstrate how certain products help an individual with disabilities do some coding. And then following that, I'm going to share with you a couple of slides to give a good example of this image description that Hector was mentioning. So if we could have that second video now, I think we can do that.
Košice, Slovakia. Anton Mirochenko.
My name is Anton and I'm from Ukraine. As a freelance developer living with cerebral palsy, Tasks like typing and speaking can be difficult, which limits my ability to communicate effectively. I realized early on that I was different from others and encountered discrimination and inequality at a young age. I always inform my clients about my disability. Moreover, I present it as an advantage because it provides me with extensive experience in solving complex and unconventional problems.
Anton's hand reaches for his mouse.
When I first heard about GitHub Copilot, I was doubtful that it could handle such a complex task as coding, but I was surprised at how helpful and relevant the suggestions it gave me were.
Lines of code in GitHub Copilot.
Because of my disability, it's easier to type fewer characters.
Anton says, with AI with Copilot, I can code my intention more precisely.
I can now not only write the code itself, but also detailed comments, documentation, and project descriptions. Previously, I physically couldn't afford to do this. I firmly believe that AI has enormous potential to make a positive impact on the lives of people with disabilities. It has truly assisted me to optimize my workflow.
Outside, Anton sits with friends.
I aim to harness the power of AI for the betterment of our lives.
Microsoft.
And Hector, thank you for facilitating that video so that we could see that demonstration. And what I want to do now is, if I have a short slide deck that we're going to look at, if we can now go to that. This, we just saw a fascinating demonstration of how AI can help people in the workplace. This next example is a little bit of a personal one. So we're going to talk about traditional versus generative AI. So we can go to slide 2. And on slide 2, you see a picture here. And for those like me who are blind and vision impaired, we're going to get to a description of this picture. But where did this picture come from? A number of years ago, my son, who was 6 at the time, ran to me very excited, and he said, "Mom, the view out of my window, it was amazing, and I just caught it on my iPad." And this picture was taken by my 6-year-old, and he didn't quite have the words to explain to me why it was exciting. Now, if I used technologies that were available at the time, or even the basic technology that my iPhone has now, all I get as a description, without more from traditional AI, what I get is a group of buildings under an orange and blue sky. And this does tell me more. This version of an image description that was automatically generated was revolutionary to me. But let's see what we can do to advance that. What does generative AI do? So on the next slide, if we can move to that, we have a description generated by an app that maybe gives me a clue of why my 6-year-old was so excited, even though he couldn't necessarily articulate it to me. The picture shows a beautiful cityscape during sunset. The foreground features 2 large brick buildings with multiple windows. The buildings are symmetrical and have a classic architectural design. The windows on the buildings are reflecting the golden light from the sunset. In between the 2 buildings, there is a street that leads to the horizon. The street is dimly lit with a few street lights. The sky is the most captivating part of this picture. It is filled with vibrant colors, ranging from deep orange to pink, creating a stunning gradient effect. The colors are reflected on the windows of the buildings, adding to the beauty of the scene. The picture seems to be taken from behind a window with a screen, as there's a slight grid pattern overlaying the image. So I can say that if I had had this kind of technology when my son sent this to me, I would have had this description that helped me understand his emotion when he sent that picture to me. So this, to me, these are examples of the potential of generative AI and the differences that they can make in the personal and professional lives of people with disabilities. But let's talk a little bit about some other considerations. And I guess before we move on to that, would like to ask if any of the other panelists has any comments that they want to make based on sort of this description of the evolution of AI and its benefits for people with disabilities.
Angie, this is Nikki. I was just going to say that I think it is amazing what the possibilities of AI can bring in terms of assistive technology. And I know that we're heading into, well, what are the considerations? But, I don't want it to get lost. I think sometimes when we talk about AI, especially when, we're legal talking about AI, sometimes we get lost in, what are all the potential issues, and we, forget a little bit about what the, what, to your example, like what beauty it can bring and what experiences it can bring. So throughout that, I just wanted to throw that in because I think it's just so important to remember like what the impact of this technology can be. With as long as we are using it responsibly and we are very intentional and mindful about how we develop it.
Thanks, Nikki. Jonathan, are you there with our second question? And I might say Nikki you might want to lead us in responses to this one, but we can, and then we'll sort of look to other panelists to contribute as well.
Thank you very much, Angie, and very good to meet all of the panel again. I think I've seen all of you before, so it's good to see some friendly, familiar faces. So just off the back of that, really important and interesting question about how generative AI is changing this landscape and the important work it's been doing. We just want to consider kind of what issues do companies consider if they want to allow employees with disabilities to use generative AI tools in the workplace? And how can companies balance potentially competing interests in privacy, security, and also accessibility? And what about industries or sectors where sensitive data is routinely processed? And this might be in terms of disability-specific tools, or any other way in which companies may, wish to make use of that generative AI. So, Nikki, I imagine you may have some thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I think the first question that companies really should be asking is how helpful is this tool? And I think Hector and Stuart both asked that question. When I look at it from a little bit of a legal or governance perspective, I look at it as in how does the tool function? How has it been tested? What sort of data has it been informed with? And it goes back to the question of there are many options for generative AI tools. It's one of the hottest things that's out there, but not every tool is made the same way. It's not vetted the same way. It doesn't have the same governance. So it's really important to understand when companies are talking with their vendors and their suppliers to make sure they understand the back end of the tool. How was this tool created? Was it created? If it's being used as an assistive tool, especially for persons with disabilities, was it created with that in mind, right? Or is it being retrofitted into that role? Because that, especially in a generative AI standpoint, can create two very different outcomes, right? With generative AI, it's very different than website accessibility, where you go back in and you're coding certain accessibility tools into your website. Here, the core of generative AI, if it's not trained with the proper data, it's not going to be something that can assist the person that you're trying to use it to assist with. And we see this a lot when it comes to AI hallucinations, for example, which leads to incorrect output or misleading output, or just output that wasn't informed because it wasn't informed by diverse data to begin with. And I think that has a much larger impact on this community than it does on communities that can go back and, they're relying on it for some efficiencies, but they can easily double check, right? Where the goal here is to make the process easier. Double checking may not be, the same process. There may be other obstacles. So that's definitely one issue that we have to think about. And I think a lot of what I'm going to say is vet your vendors, vet your technology, know more about the technology than just sort of, we have something out of the box that we want to implement. This sounds really great. The marketing materials are really great. So let's do it. There's a lot more due diligence that has to go into it. I think the other question that comes up a lot is with respect to the privacy of the information. It's so important, again, because AI is so data driven, to understand how vendors are going to use the data that goes into it. Is it what we called, is it a trained model? So it's coming to you with data. Is it untrained model? It's going to use your data to train it. Is your data going to stay within your environment? Is that data then going to be used for other models that are going to third parties? All of those things are so important to know, especially again for this community, because you need to know where is the data proliferating. And are you honoring the privacy promises that you've made to your employees to begin with? Are you complying with the law with respect to the information that you have? And we see new laws come up right now in the US. It's just sort of every week there's a new regulation or a new law about how information should be treated, including automated data processing. And so it's really important to understand, do users have choice and transparency about how their information is being used within these tools? So I'll stop there, just because I feel like I could talk for a very, very long time on all these things, but.
It's a really interesting point you've made there, Nikki, and including, as you say, the way in which this is used, and the points around the double checking not always being an option. I think often we have this in conversations around AI that, it's fine, we can just, you can it speeds up the process and you can then just check it yourself. But depending on what you're using it for, if you're using it in order to do something that somebody might not be able to do in a manual way, that's not really going to be much help if you need to do that thing that you're trying to avoid in order to check that it's accurate. So that's a really good point. I wonder if anyone else on the panel had any comments on this one. Yes, Stuart, I think you.
I was going to say, one of the things folks should be looking at as good consumers is what controls do you have? I mean, most folks, when they buy something out of a box, don't just sort of self-deploy it. There are settings which can address a lot of the issues that you're talking about and give you some real thought. You want to think about how you want to use it. I mean, if you want to use something based on a existing model, that'll give you certain sort of protections and whatnot. But chances are, as we go into more and more specific scenarios, we're going to want a more performant model that's informed by the data that we have. And how do we want to do that? And we want to think about the kind of controls and whatnot that are that are available to to draw the sort of lines. One thing that's really got to think, we started off with the question of how do we make it, thinking about the use of this by folks with disabilities. I mean, I think everyone is going to use it. It's not going to be just a a tool for folks with disabilities. But what will make it good, not just making sure that it, that it's accessible, but when Nikki was talking about data sets and usefulness of data sets, to make, to put a little finer point on that, we need people with disabilities and their lives and all of the accoutrements to inform what those models are, so that when people take a picture of someone in a wheelchair or in a assisted device, or using a rollator, or using a white cane, or using all those sorts of things, AI is going to be much better than the average Joe that starts to sort of interpret and normalize what it means to have folks with disabilities, present in the world. So, and in a lot of ways, AI can be a force multiplier if programmed correctly.
Absolutely. Hector, did you want to come to this one as well?
Yeah, thank you. feel like we've got two Microsoft people on the panel, so I don't want to like just hog with a Microsoft voice. but I think just to add to that is like you need to know what's happening with your data, and all too often when I'm engaging with companies around this stuff, they don't actually know. They're not asking the questions, Nikki. I mean, that's absolutely the case. But also maybe sometimes they also make assumptions that it is being data processed. So let's just take a really easy example that you'll remember. But if you think about captioning right now, okay. Did we ask the question for this call, like, where's this data going, is the obvious question. And some regulated industries are really challenging us on that. Like, where is this data being processed? Where is my data going? When you're captioning or transcribing is going to be a big part of the AI piece. In Windows 11 now, we have a captions model, which is completely offline. None of that data gets processed. You can literally turn the internet off and it will caption you. And that's a great option if you want to make sure that your data is not being processed. But then there are other options where essentially it is going, your data is going off into the cloud and being processed somewhere. We've got to start saying that there are options for people. The journey to get Windows captioning offline required a load of online work before, where people were happy for their data to contribute to the accuracy of those captions. And it was at that point that we sort of said, right, we need an offline option for people, which is also great for people who don't have great connectivity, different parts of the world where they're not going to be able to rely on an online captioning option. So there's this awareness that needs to be in place for people to kind of ask the question, like, what is happening with the data is like the easy question. The other thing, just to kind of come back on, Nikki, with something you said about website accessibility. Website accessibility is more nuts and bolts, but we're doing a terrible job. As society, like 99% websites are just not accessible. So as a society, we're not doing an awesome job, which is forcing people with disabilities to say, we need an AI option here to make some of this experience accessible. And so if you go into some of those early search options, things like, I mean, ours is Bing Chat, okay? But in Bing Chat, you can say, hey, I'm a wheelchair user and I want to be able to go to Seattle Town Center. How do I get there? And it will go and pull that information in from the internet with the sources and get that information. But it will pull that information from a ton of inaccessible websites. So the net new experience is there. What we need to know is, where has that information come from? So there are links to say which sites it has come from. The challenge back to society is, well, if you wanted to interrogate that data, what are you doing to make that experience also accessible so it becomes accessible to people? But trust me, I mean, Angie, just sort of turning to you, but obviously the blind community are going to basically say, we're going to use this stuff. Yeah. Like because it gives us net new experiences. It's turning inaccessible experiences accessible routinely. But the full experience is obviously going to that person's website and having the great experience they've designed for you. How do we take the opportunity of AI automating some of this to then turn through to those companies and say, but we also need the rigorous experiences of accessible websites with us choosing to go and be able to interrogate that information?
I think that's a really good point. And I'll just say, from a personal perspective, it's very, it can be very frustrating when you are dealing with, the majority of websites having accessibility issues. And then we have these tools that come online, and I will just, I'll just be a little, a little bit personally about me. I have always been blind, or at least since, before I had the capacity to record memory. So I have maybe about 3 months worth of vision. And I don't have like an emotional need to have vision. And so what I was surprised by was the emotional impact on me when I started to be able to get some of these image descriptions that are more fulsome, and I could just get them very easily and independently, with a product. It surprised me that I reacted the way that I did. So yeah, the potential for those to really kind of impact you on the personal level is one thing. But yeah, you're right. How do we bridge that gap so that the experience is more inclusively designed, so that we don't have to necessarily have a separate way to get through that? And that sort of segues into the next question that I sort of have here, and I want to keep talking about the themes that we've discussed, but also introduce this concept, that we sort of have started to. But in addition to to those issues, there's the perennial concern of bias in AI tools. What measures can AI tool developers as well as users take to ensure that generative AI doesn't perpetuate bias against people with disabilities? And for that, I'm thinking, about potentially making sure that training data sets are representative and things of that nature. But, as an example, if there is a tool that is trying to analyze someone's facial expressions or something like that to determine how they, what their emotions are, I have also been told that, some people who, let's say some people who are blind may have different types of facial expressions because they maybe didn't have that visual input. I've been told that even though I only had like 3 months of visual input, as I mentioned earlier, I do not have the ability to do a poker face. I've been told I have one of the most expressive faces. So for better or for worse. But, how do we work to ensure that if we're using an AI tool, although, frankly, not a big fan of using an AI tool to analyze expressions for many purposes, though, maybe if it's just giving some descriptive information to me, it would be helpful to have that be, more accurate. But going off on a tangent, the question more being, what measures can we take to ensure that generative AI doesn't, perpetuate disability specific bias, either on the developer side or on the end user side? And so I just kind of throw that question out for anybody who wants to talk. Okay, go ahead.
Can I
Well,
just
I'll-
step
I'll-
in there,
Go ahead,
Andy?
Nikki.
Sorry, it's David here. I hope everyone can hear me. I've problems with the microphone here. I think this is a great point, and I think again it follows through a number of the things that have been discussed. Stuart's point about collaboration between people with disabilities and people who don't have or apparently have disabilities. And I think Hector's point about rolling out generative AI through experience, talking to people about how it works. I think in many respects, the whole issue of rolling out generative AI is an opportunity because it presents opportunities and challenges for everybody, including people with disabilities. And there are going to be issues, and that was an amazing example of the impact that you just mentioned, Angie, with the kind of description and that technology that you described. But there are going to be varying degrees of impact on everybody, the way they are affected and use generative AI. And I think the key, and this goes back to the previous question about policies within industry, etc., is to really to have diversity, equity, and inclusion in its broadest sense at the heart of the development of the technology, of the tools. And I think, the bias needs to be avoided by emphasizing the fact that this is being rolled out to everybody. Everybody has different needs. Some of them may relate to their disability, other may relate to specific aspects of their job. The important thing is that this is a quality of treatment across the board for everybody. And the fact that certain tools may be more impactful for people with disabilities is just part of the rollout process. The level of impact will be different in different respects for different people. So I think there's an opportunity there for, I think, the way we roll out the technology to show equality of treatment for people with disabilities. But also you can see how it could so easily be turned on its head if people suddenly say, we're going to really emphasize the particular technology that is impacting people with disabilities. And this all seems very problematic. And then again, we've got the prejudice coming to the fore of people with disabilities, and that's what we need to avoid. The key really for me is rolling all of these technologies out equally across the board and for firm and company policies to reflect that, and ultimately, of course, the regulatory regime to also reflect that.
Thank you, David. That's a great perspective. Especially like given your work in the ESG area as well. And I think Nikki, you had something that you wanted to add to this discussion as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to add just, really going off of what David says as well, is that it is an area that is of high concern, especially from regulators. We've already seen regulations and laws specifically directed towards the use of automated decision-making tools and AI, especially in the employment context, because the impact of bias in that context, while the impact of bias is incredible in every context, but especially in the employment context is a big deal. And so, one of the things that we already kind of talked about earlier with just data testing and monitoring and verification and understanding your data, as Hector put it, right? And where is it coming from? Is bias audits. And this is something that every company should really be looking at, no matter why, no matter what they are implementing AI for, really any reason they're implementing generative AI, it really should be monitored to see, are you getting the results that you should expect to get from this tool? But especially in the employment context, especially in the context where you're utilizing automated decision-making for anything that impacts the legal or economic rights of an individual, you need to take that extra step to make sure you are getting the results that you expect. And so you have laws like the law in New York, which mandate audits if you're using those kinds of tools, like the regulations in California, which have more transparency and reporting requirements, not in place yet, still suggested, very much being debated, but the trend is recognizing that these are really important. And I mean, even from a US perspective, even under the president's executive order, he's asked NIST to go back and look at the AI governance regulations, make them more robust, especially to establish a governance process, one part of which is continuously monitoring to make sure that your AI tool is working in the way that it is supposed to and giving you the outputs. One personal example that I would give is, for fun and for legal presentation examples, I've gone in and used AI to, look at what is my AI generated image looks like, and it does not look like me at all. It does not look like my skin color. It does not recognize my ethnicity, and that's fine. Different sources of these tools will perform differently based on how they were created. But that's a really significant impact. If, for example, Angie, you were looking at an image of me in that, you would not see an image of what I actually look like, right? But you would not know necessarily that is misinformation,
right?
And so it's just really important to make sure that companies that are implementing that really are checking to make sure, like, okay, just even simple tests, like, is this working the way that it's supposed to work?
That's a really good point, because again, if I'm using one of those tools my own self, I know that it may present information incorrectly. So to the extent that we can help moderate, to help negate that, it benefits me because I may not have the ability to independently check it. So anyway, some very good points there.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in to say, one of the things that Nikki said that's really struck me is it is making me think more broadly about what we think about our inputs. I think when I initially was thinking casually about, disability representation, what am I thinking about? I'm thinking about, visual representation, so on and so forth. But when you get to the point of talking about, job outcomes, economic benefit outcomes, there's a whole series of other inputs that are not visual, that are life experiential,
Yep.
Need to be included properly in a way to generate sort of, truthful results. And we also have to decide where we want to go. I mean, AI should follow policy, not the other way around. You should figure out where we want to go. What are the input that we're going to need broadly, life experientially, not just visually, to get sort of an outcome that we want. And we want to be thinking as responsible human beings about the outcomes that we want, and not just let AI magic work along the way. Again, these things are designed to be co-pilots, not not new overlords. I think as long as we sort of keep our hands on the steering wheel. But the other thing is, it also illustrates great opportunities for community engagement to flesh out all those inputs that we really need. And that sort of, to me, sounds like sort of a rich opportunity for engagement across the board to interrogate, to understand how do we translate, the disabled economic life into terms that make sense for, pick the application that we're talking about.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. We have only a few minutes left. We want to be respectful of everybody's time, but maybe the next question that we had on the list, that Jonathan, do you want to go with that? It sort of does feed into what we've just talked about. It's a good segue into that, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Angie. The next question we had was actually on what role should government policies and regulations play in ensuring that AI tools foster inclusion for people with disabilities. As Angie says, we only have a few minutes left, but if anyone did have some suggestions on that or any ideas, then is a hot topic. So
yeah, if I could just come in quickly, Andy, it's Hector. So I mean, it was interesting to note at the recent UK AI summit, disability was used as a kind of one of the wonderful kind of opportunities, but nobody was talking about the rigor of accessibility. And so I do think, like, this next digital transformation era, we've got to make sure that disability has a seat at the table. Okay, in terms of, like, it's not just going to be about security and privacy; it's also going to be about accessibility. So I think there's even getting disability into government policy conversations is like starter for 10. And I do think, because the story is so strong around disability and AI, I think we've got a chance, but we're going to have to be very, very deliberate about it. As with all good policy, it should encourage innovation, but also recognize risk. And so inclusive innovation is fantastic. Risky, excluding innovation is legally challenging, right? So I think we've got to make sure that those feedback loops are the bit that we build into the experiences, and feedback loops are what we should be building in through regulation. So, for instance, if you're getting bad or biased advice, what's the feedback loop for the customer in terms of, or the user, to feed back into it? The very earliest versions of OpenAI constantly apologized for disability. I'm blind and I want to be able to go from X to Y. I'm sorry you're blind. Well, what are you apologizing for? Yeah, right, was the kind of the in joke for people using it. But of course that's not an in joke. That's reinforcing bias to the bystander. So I think we've got to be, we've got to call it out, and from a policy piece, I just think, what's the feedback? How do we get that going?
Thanks, Hector. And we are about to wrap up, and the next panel is going to start in about 5 minutes. We'll have a little bit of a break, but I did want to just see if there are any audience questions or other questions that we might address in the last minute or two here before we conclude. And, question now, or, well, actually, you can always maybe reach out to some of us if you have other questions, but I want to extend enormous thanks to everybody for participating in this discussion and the summit at large, and for helping to make this, to help us, kind of begin a really thought-provoking discussion around the promises and pitfalls, I guess, maybe of AI, specifically in the disability context. So we are going to pause briefly before our next panel and take about a 5-minute break. But again, thanks, Stuart, Hector, Nikki, and David. Really appreciate you all being with us today.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. And hi, everybody, welcome. Welcome back. We're going to resume with panel 2. And for that, I'm going to introduce the moderators of this panel and let them let you know what is coming up. For that, we have Georgia Crossman and Luke Debevic. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's Georgia and I'm an associate in the corporate team in London here at Reed Smith. I'd like to welcome you all to our second panel, which is titled A Call to Action Through Allyship, a sector focus on representation. And we're going to kick off the second panel with a short video from Sarah Brown, who's the chair at Their World, executive chair at the Global Business Coalition for Education, and also the wife of the former British Prime Minister Gordon Brown.
I'm delighted to introduce this next session, A Call to Action Through Allyship, a sector focus on representation, with a terrific lineup of speakers exploring disability in the context of ESG, how to align values to business goals, and a check-in on whether everyone is stepping up to do all they can. Now, it's clear that businesses need to think more about harnessing the talents of all employees and future employees, and to unlock the potential of people of all abilities to build the best workforce. This makes sense to realise ESG goals in full, to meet diversity and inclusion policies, but also has so many positives to delivering corporate results, capturing all talents, reaching the widest customer base, powering innovation in the workplace, and even in products and services. This happens when businesses pay close attention to removing the obstacles and unnecessary barriers to foster a workplace that offers the widest inclusion for people of all abilities. Our panel today will look at this issue in detail and share their wisdom on doing better for tomorrow's young leaders, investing in education, in training, and smart workplace adaptations, thereby putting policies and good intentions into action.
So thank you, Ms. Brown. There were some great thoughts. We'll hope to live up to that introduction. My name is Luke Debevic. I'm a partner at the Insurance Recovery Group here at Reed Smith. Basically means that we represent policyholders in disputes with insurance companies and negotiations. I'm one of the co-founders of our Disability Inclusion Group Leaders. I'll briefly disclose that the entirety of my experience with disability has been within the latter half of my career here. I found allies before I learned advocacy, and I'm very appreciative of this event. We have 4 excellent panelists joining with us for this next segment. Joyce, could you begin by introducing yourself?
I am Joyce Marombe. I have been working in the education field for over 25 years, and I'm very delighted to be here today. Right now, I'm working on leadership, which I believe it is so important, especially in this area of disability, to move our agendas ahead. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joyce. And thank you for joining us from many time zones away. We appreciate it. Amelia, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Amelia Wilson. I'm a programme lawyer at Channel 4 Television in London, and I also did a secondment to Reed Smith and the entertainment team as part of my training contract. I am neurodiverse. I've also had sort of mental health challenges, and I'm really passionate about on-screen and off-screen diversity. So, people who are working behind the cameras, such as myself, maybe not behind the cameras, maybe behind the paperwork, and but also on-screen, and how we can support on-screen talent and also on-screen contributors to sort of be a part of the Channel 4 experience. And I think we're doing really well, and I'm really happy to be here and sort of talk about that with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Angela, could you please introduce yourself?
Thanks, Luke. I'm Angela Lee. I am a second-year law student at Harvard Law School in the JD program. I am the president of the Disabled Law Students Association here and the law student liaison to the American Bar Association's Commission for Disability Rights. And allyship is also hugely important to me, very similar to Luke's story. I did not become disabled until later in life, and the support of those around me critically with disabilities, but also those without disabilities, helped me come into my own as an advocate, but also as somebody who is still young and ambitious.
Great. Thank you, Angela, for joining us. Kevin, I know you very well. We've known each other for a while, and I know this event's as exciting for you as it is for me. But could you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, thank you very much, Luke. And thank you for everyone joining today. My name is Kevin Hara. I am counsel in Reed Smith's San Francisco office, and I'm in the Life Sciences and Health Industries group. And I was also one of the co-founders of Leaders with Luke, and am proud to be representing Reed Smith. I have a physical disability, a spinal cord injury that I had since high school, and so I am passionate about advocating for disability diversity, and it's really an honor to be here today with all of my fellow panelists, and thank you for that great introduction, Luke.
Thank you, Kevin. So Georgia and I will be asking our panelists some questions that we hope will be as interesting for the audience as they are to ourselves. I guess I'll begin with Joyce. Education and business seem to be deeply linked. How does education lay the foundation for those with disabilities in a commercial setting?
I think I just will start by talking about my personal experience. Education is really the block that makes all the difference for people with disabilities. If you block this channel, then the people with disabilities cannot really participate in any area of life. And so for me, it's been really the one thing that has opened so many doors for me. I got a disability 6 months after I was born, a physical disability, and the only language that I had from outside was that I can't do anything for myself, or my life kind of looked like it was over. But education opened the doors for me to play as equally with everybody else. And as much as I had many challenges getting to school and going home, once I got into the classroom, it felt like this was the equalizer and I could play here. And so I know so many children, especially in developing countries, who cannot get education because they can't even get there. But once they get there, the discrimination that exists around different issues and what people think about you and what they think you can do and cannot do. But for me, education kind of was the key to show me whether I can or I can't. But that was under the backdrop of having allies at home, people that convinced me and told me I could do it, people that also assisted me, not in a patronizing way. And so I see education as really the door to so many things, and yet many people cannot get there. And the fix that is needed is just a small thing that people need to do. So it makes business sense to me. If you ask me why the businesses should open their doors to people with disabilities, and education is the way. That is the one thing. If you block, they will never get their foot on the door. And I am really convinced that even some of the obstacles are not that big. And even the ones that look big, the economic cost of blocking that person and basically destroying their life is worth every effort. So I am a firm believer in education, because I want to open doors for other kids that do not have those doors open for them. And I really want to today really speak to businesses and others who can to really give people with disabilities a chance and not block them, because most barriers are man-made. And many times education opens the way and builds a bridge for us to be able to contribute in a very meaningful way to a society where we are owed and where the society owes us to participate without any discrimination.
Thank you so much, Joyce. Georgia?
Thanks, Luke. Thanks, Joyce. I couldn't agree with you more, Joyce, in terms of education, laying that foundation and opening up doors for people with disabilities. So thank you. It was really great to hear your insight there. I think we'll maybe go to Amelia next and ask you a question which you kind of alluded to in your introduction. So I know that before today's panel, we spoke about the importance of disclosure and fair treatment in businesses and also specifically in interview processes. It would be great if you could give us a bit of background on how Channel 4 ensure there's space for individuals with disabilities within productions and the broadcasting industry more widely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something I'm really excited to talk about because I think we do it well. And I'm very proud to work for a company that does this. So one of the big things we do is we're a part of the Disability Confidence Scheme. And what that means is we aim to guarantee interviews for disabled applicants who meet the kind of minimum job requirement. And we think that's really important because then we're able to get disabled candidates are being able to showcase themselves in an interview which they might not previously have got. We also have sort of many guides and many sort of training things that we offer to our staff. So, for example, we have a guide to hiring disabled talent. And that kind of includes kind of top lines as, never assume anything or anybody, focusing on adjustments, not conditions or impairments, and, ensuring that you understand that every disabled person is different. Not only that, it's not just about getting talent in the door, it's about progressing talent as well. And so we also have a guide to progressing talent and also a guide to sort of including disabled people within the within our channel. So I think they're also, those guides are, written by people with lived experience, which I think is really important, is that we are not just kind of having a manager who doesn't actually have the experience kind of writing something that they're not necessarily fully aware of. And that's definitely, we've got sort of consultants. We also have people within the channel who are specialized at their workplace disability managers, and we have one that works within the workplace, so looking at staff within Channel 4, but then we have people who also sort of work to help with increased sort of disabled talent on screen and off screen within the production community. We also have something called our code of portrayal, which is really important about when you're portraying disabled people on screen. And some of the things that are included in there are giving disabled people agency, showing them in 3D, and sort of using empathy as opposed to sympathy. And they've got sort of a range of portrayal from sort of incidental to sort of core. And it's just about sort of also offsetting stereotypes as well. Particularly, if you're, it's not about completely ignoring a person's disability, because obviously that forms part of them and part of their lived experience, but it's not sort of shoehorning someone into a role because they are disabled. They are also, talented individuals. And we also sign up something called the TV Access Project, which is working together with other broadcasters and SVODs to sort of create substantive and permanent structural shifts to ensure there's an access provision for disabled talent as well. And one other thing, I know we've got, I'm rattling them off, but there's so many that, and that's not a bad thing. Also, we are showing the Paralympics as we have done since 2012. Really excited about that in Paris next year. This year, we have recruited 19 people to our training scheme, which is looking to launch, and it was ring-fenced for disabled talent, so they can launch their careers in TV production. And it's a 12-month role for those 19 individuals who will go and work with one of our partners, normally sort of one of our production companies, and they're very big production companies that are working with us, and they will sort of cultivate that talent, and some of them will actually be sort of going to the Paralympics as well. So yeah, and sort of over the next year, we're looking to sort of continue that, you know, sort of ring fencing of certain roles, giving opportunities to people who wouldn't necessarily get it, and developing that talent. And for us, it's not about sort of tick boxing. It's about giving people, you know, who we know are talented, who we know can do a fantastic job, but have just never been given that opportunity. And we're so proud of all of them. And I'm very proud to be a colleague and an ally of all of them. So thank you.
Thank you, Amelia. There's a lot to think about there, and some innovation in getting people involved and included. I really appreciate that response. Angela, maybe I could ask you a question next. How can allies assist us in providing fair opportunities for people with disabilities in ensuring that they can safely disclose their conditions, their accommodation needs, and especially when they're just starting out in their careers?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is the most commonly asked question, I would say, amongst our sort of freshman class of students who are going off to their first job interviews is, you know, the big question: do I disclose? Do I not disclose? If I disclose, when? And I think a lot of our supporting employer partners are really eager to learn how they can help make it a space for students who would want to disclose. And I think the biggest thing about doing so is providing transparency in what is being evaluated during the interview process and at the beginning of somebody's career. I think, you know, disabled people are best at evaluating when their disability is going to affect their ability to perform a certain task or perform a certain task a certain way. And so being transparent and not saying things like, oh, we're looking for a good cultural fit, or we're looking for somebody who can speak confidently, is really important, because somebody who, you know, has a learning disability like myself and might struggle to make eye contact while speaking, it doesn't mean that I can't speak confidently, but I would want to make sure that I'm not being judged for not making eye contact when I can otherwise do everything just as well. And being concrete about those evaluating factors is one of the ways in which individuals who are seeking opportunities, who are disabled, can figure out if it's the right moment for them to disclose. Because I think a lot of candidates don't want to be seen as the disabled candidate, and they don't want to disclose when not necessary or relevant. But if they want to talk about that part of their identity, and they want to talk about how that disability might interact with their career, giving them that opportunity by providing context is what is often the most important role to unlock.
Thank you, Angela. I'll just reflect back that students will reach out and just ask that same question all the time. It's what students want to know. Should I self-disclose or not? And to any employers out there who are thinking about this, it's worth providing the opportunity to students to know that they can disclose and seek reasonable accommodations even in the application process. I'll pause there for a moment. I think Georgia, you might be up next.
Thanks, Luke. And thanks, Angela. It's really interesting to hear insights on that. I remember having the dilemma myself of whether to disclose or not. And like Luke's mentioned, I think that it's something that everyone with a disability has to think about, or at least put some thought to at some point when they're going into education or work. So yeah, it's really interesting to hear what you have to say about that. I think now we're going to go to Kevin, if that's okay. We've got a question for you, Kevin. It'd be great to get your views on how business objectives of typical corporations and private companies align with the provision of opportunities for those with disabilities.
Thank you, Georgia. That's an excellent question. And corporations and companies, they want to succeed and they want to do their best. And for them to be able to do that, they have to have the best and most talented individuals all working toward a common goal. And that is why recruitment of persons with disabilities is so important for those organizations, because there are so many supremely talented and people who are capable of achieving really high goals who have a disability, whether it is someone who is neurodiverse or a person with a physical disability. They can all bring their unique strengths to contribute to the success of the organization. They have resilience and dedication to showcase those talents and expertise. And it's really about, as Stuart expressed earlier, about what people can do, focusing on their abilities rather than anything they lack or their disabilities. And that brings me to something that I think is commendable in Bjarne Telemann of Haleon and Prashant Dubey of Elevate, who is now at Agiloft. They co-authored an open letter challenging CEOs and compliance officers to do something concrete to further disability inclusion and equity at their organizations. And that open letter has received a number of pledges supporting that important metric, that important mission. So having a shared vision between Reed Smith as a law firm and our clients is increasingly important, because showing that similar commitment really is what makes all the difference. As people have expressed before, we cannot do this alone. We all need to partner together, and that's why allyship, especially among businesses, is so key to our success.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Joyce, in your experience, what's the role of technology in creating opportunities for those with disabilities, not just in education, but in business spaces too? Oh, you're on mute.
I think that is another place where one can equalize the playing ground for people with disabilities, because of the way this opens up doors that were not possible before. Because, for example, in education, some of the children just can't make it to school because of the distances that they have to travel to get there. And so if this is accessible to them, then they are able to access this from home and then be able to just be able to learn from where they are. I think for others, especially people who are visually impaired, and also, you know, people that have hearing impaired, the options now are completely endless. What really makes the difference is lack of access of those facilities, especially for people from developing countries. You find that I still remember a student that came to us and they had to be assisted to go anywhere. And once they left and went to, like, say it was Australia, they were able to just do everything for themselves because the training was there on how to be independent and how they could do what they needed to do. And then they were visually impaired, but the development of the different things to support are just they're just there right now, and they were not there before. So I really just get excited because I can see so many points where people with disabilities chances are open that they were not before. And so, especially for companies and others that are even working in this area, there are great opportunities to make what was not possible. And I think, you know, for employers, some of the changes that are required are really minimal. I remember, especially just in my former job, the employer contacting me 2 weeks before I got there, and in a very pleasant way said, what do you need for us to do to be able to make this comfortable for you as you come to the office? And, you know, things like just sitting arrangements and where I could work from and when I could work from wherever, and so many things. There is little things that can be done, but I think it is also very important to give people with disabilities a chance to be able to say for themselves, not to speak for them what they need and what they don't need. And so many doors can be open, and they are open. And I feel like now the obstacle that is there, you know, right now in terms of technology is amazing if it is accessible and it is available and it can be open. And this is the one thing I keep following and finding out. Where can we find simple, you know, ways of using technology, especially in developing countries, and really removing very artificial barriers that are put there by human beings. But the technology now, if we can accommodate those things and then give people the necessary skills to be able to do that and to be able to access these things, I think it is a great time to be alive now. And I'm really hoping that both the business sector and others who can help can actually step up and remove these barriers, because I think for many of us now, the sky is the limit, and we can decide our own, boundaries, how far we can go if those chances are open. So I'm really hoping all of us can really see this. It is a great opportunity for people with disabilities. Technology, for me, is the way for many of us, if we had proper access, and we also the opportunities who are open to those who don't know that those opportunities are there, and the help that parents, allies, others who care about this thing. You don't have to read for people who are visually impaired anymore. Technology does the whole thing. So I think we have an opportunity that we can use without costing us that much, because some of the things, it is just tweaking the technology or just enabling one or two things here. If we are conscious and we are willing and open to see what an opportunity this is to be there at this particular time in history.
Yeah, here.
Thank you so much, Joyce. I don't know if you're going to say something then, Luke. I didn't want to cut you off. I was just going to say thank you. Again, I think that probably the COVID pandemic has encouraged people to adopt technology more, and made people more open to adopting technology. And for me personally, that's made a massive difference in the workplace, having the opportunity to have meetings over Teams or Zoom, and people being receptive to that. On days where I maybe can't make it into the office because of my disability, that's been invaluable. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think next, if that's okay, we're going to come back to you, Amelia, and just ask you, I know that you briefly touched upon before that Channel 4 play a really pivotal role in the Paralympics. And given the importance of the role that the channel played in the London Paralympics in 2012, it'd be really interesting to get your take on the importance of representation in sport for those with disabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were hugely proud and are every Paralympics of our output and just about kind of bringing it into the mainstream. I think part of the reason that Channel 4, started, broadcasting the Paralympics is because we wanted it to be, our aim is for it to be on par with the Olympics. And actually, it's worked really well for us. I mean, people are really astounded. Actually, it's been buried a little bit before, hasn't it, on other channels, and actually we made a big showcase of it, and I think the reaction of our viewers was, oh my gosh, not only are these people sort of, I think one in particular that everyone was amazed by is the archery. And I don't know if you've seen it, but it's where people with disabilities can use their feet, for example, to fire the crossbow. And I mean, I can't even do it with my arms. So to have someone who's, in a wheelchair, who's able to do that with their feet is just mind-blowing. And I think it was, our campaign at the time was about superhumans. These people, we're not going to say, these people are disabled. We're saying they're superhumans, and 100% they were, and I think that really kind of elevated disabled sport, definitely within the UK. And we sort of try and build on that every time that we are screen the Paralympics. And as I said, we did our Paralympic training scheme for people behind the camera, but also the Beijing Winter Games. It was the presenting lineup was all disabled presenters, and that was a first for a broadcaster within sport to do that. And so we're very proud of that. Sort of carrying on from the Paralympics, and I think one of the things that we were very keen to do was not kind of make a big splash about it. It's London 2012, and then let's just forget about it. That's absolutely not what we wanted to do. And we sort of continued with pushing disability within our programming. So the last leg was a program that was born out of the Paralympics. That's been going for over 10 years now. It's one of our most successful programs. All 2 out of the 3 presenters have disabilities. But actually it's an entertainment program at heart. It's, their disabilities are referenced. There are several jokes about their disabilities that they bring into it and write themselves. But it's very much an entertainment program at heart, and rates really well. We also, this very week actually, Steph's Packed Lunch, for those of you who aren't in the UK, it's a kind of magazine live lunchtime program. It's on for about 2 hours. The whole program was dedicated to talking about disability, and that was both visible and invisible disabilities. And it covered a huge spectrum of items, such as why are so many disabled people unemployed, what can be done about that unemployment rate, learning aids, also use of assistance dogs, and also we always have a chef on the program, and the chef that we had was called the Punk Chef, who was hearing impaired. And I also think that to what Joyce said as well about sort of asking open questions, we have something called a disability access rider, and that our production companies will, if someone declares themselves to have a disability, they will ask them to sort of complete this form. And what's really good about it is it asks very open questions. It doesn't make assumptions, you are dyslexic and therefore you need this color paper, or it's very much, it's got general headings and gives maybe examples of what might be helpful, but is very much asks the contributor what communication things can we put in place to assist you. Is it wearing of name badges, introducing you to the crew ahead of time, speaking slowly, but then leaving the conversation and the opportunity for that individual to be, very clear on what their individual needs are. And I think that's been really quite revolutionary in terms of, it's thinking outside of access ramps. It's not I think a lot of people seem to think that disability is, see a person in a wheelchair. And actually it's a very broad spectrum. And so I think our access rider is very much geared to, and sometimes actually I've got one production company that does it for everybody. And actually their feeling is some people might not know they're disabled or may not believe they can identify as disabled, but we have so many people who have maybe mental health challenges that actually some of those reasonable adjustments that are in place on our access rider, they're like, oh God, yeah, actually, I'd feel so much more comfortable if I had a tour of the studio. Or, oh, you know what, actually, I get really nervous and I need to go to the toilet. It's really important for me to know where the toilet is. So, yeah, those types of things and as Joyce said, it's that kind of open questions being, asking the individual, what is it that you need, and not making assumptions. And that's what we kind of do for our sort of cast and our crew and all our contributors. Thank you.
Thanks, Amelia. I guess I'll just share in response that businesses can do more to get their folks to self-disclose if they're safe places to do it. And there's a lot of folks who they don't even know if they would or would not identify as a person with a disability and may not ever request an accommodation if they don't feel it's safe to do so. With that accommodation, the job may be done much better. And it's to a business's benefit to get out there and ask. And it's something our firm did with a program called I Count, where we just repeatedly got in front of people and provided the opportunity. I don't mean to take up too much time, but I'll also point out that the representation in sport around the London Paralympics really did matter. Our group leaders was founded essentially twice at the same time in the United States and in the UK. And the UK folks were driven to start our program through almost immediately after the London Paralympics. So thank you. Angela, what are your thoughts on how employers can ensure that interviewers know how to interact with a candidate with a disability and ensure that they're evaluating them on their merits?
I think to riff off of this theme of representation, representation is really important. I think a lot of our younger law students who are looking for employment are really valuing finding a space in which they can find mentorship with somebody who has had similar lived experiences, who also has a disability or has identified as disabled. And to that point, I think often a lot of the ask is on the candidates themselves to be able to disclose what they need, and having those open-ended questions to ask with the candidates to disclose what they need is important, certainly. But if the candidate is new to the space, they might not even know how their disability will interact with the space, and they don't know what they need. And so being able to have an employer to say, look, I know you have this important aspect of your lived experience. Here's somebody in our office or in our company who has navigated this before you. We have this disability affinity group. Feel free to reach out to certain members, and having that mentorship in which the sanctity of the disabled lived experience is really valued but not overemphasized is, I think, really, really important. And to that note, I think, having an employer say something, at the beginning, like you said, Luke, of if there's anything you want to disclose, let me know. If it comes up later, also let me know. I think there are a lot of students who feel that they may have missed their window to disclose, or that it is too late to ask for accommodations, and to push that as an option affirmatively at any point gently is, I think, really helpful and encouraging to a lot of folks who are in a position to feel like they are at the bottom of the totem pole already and don't want to be asking necessarily for more.
Thanks, Angela. It's really, really interesting to hear what you had to say about that topic, and what you just said there about missing your window or having it being too late really resonates with me, because I didn't actually get my diagnosis for my condition until after I'd been offered my training contract at Reed Smith. And I only disclosed my condition because the question was specifically asked of everyone, if we had anything, or if we developed a new condition, or any circumstances personally that we wanted to disclose. And I just think that's so important. I don't know if I would have come forward so soon to self-disclose if I wasn't asked that, or prompted in that way. It really made like a safe space, like you say. I think that we have about 4 minutes left in our allotted time, and I think I'm gonna go a bit rogue off the plan and ask everyone a question, if that's okay. I was just looking at the list of questions that we had that we wanted to get through that we knew we probably wouldn't, because there's so much interesting stuff that you all have to say. But I think going back to the theme of the panel, if I could ask everyone, if an individual is keen to be an ally but doesn't know the first steps to take, what would you suggest, or what piece of advice would you give? If we can go to you first, Angela, if that's okay.
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid to ask questions. I think, one thing that struck me as humorous from the previous panel is the fact that ChatGPT for the longest time would apologize if somebody said that they were disabled, and I think there is this misconception that just because somebody's disability is necessarily often of a medical condition or situation, that it would be rude to even ask a question. And the reality is that most of us aren't going to be able to really get the sense of what it's like to have the lived experience of being disabled, or to understand an important aspect of a disabled person's identity, until they act as if being disabled is indeed part of their day-to-day normal lived experience. And I think doing so respectfully and offering options for not answering the question is appropriate sometimes. But if it's a friend, if it's a colleague, asking ways in which you can be supportive, or ways in which you can better understand their experience, or how they can be more supportive of folks in the same situation is really helpful. I think sometimes one of the most isolating parts of being openly disabled and having that be a large part of my identity is the fact that people are so afraid of disability that they won't embrace the disabled part of my identity along with the other parts that they already know to cherish. So I cherish all of those parts of myself as much as there are obstacles that arise from my disabled experience. And I know that a lot of disabled folks out there also would like to be embraced for the whole of their identity, not just the, pretty abled parts of them.
Thanks so much, Angela. If it's okay, we'll come to you next, Kevin.
Thanks, Georgia. I think, Angela expressed it extremely well. It's fundamental for employers, or anyone who wants to be an ally, to really not have any preconceived notions, not to make assumptions that people can't do something, and really don't be afraid to ask. It's better to understand what an individual might need in terms of accommodation. People would much rather be approached and asked how they would like to do something than just to be ignored or not given an opportunity at all, because people with disabilities are capable of doing so many things. It's just they need to be given the opportunity. And Joyce expressed this very well earlier. It's just we don't want to create obstacles. And I thought you said it so beautifully. Most of the obstacles or challenges people face are man-made. And so anything we can do to reduce that, to make a safe space, as people have expressed, for them to, have the opportunity to succeed at the highest level.
Thanks, Kevin. If it's okay, we'll come to you next, Joyce.
I think it's Kevin already said it. Don't lock the door. Don't block. Don't be the handicap, is what I really would say, because a lot of us are eager and willing and able in our different ways to really be able to contribute. And yet all these other assumptions and ideas that are actually misconceptions, I couldn't say enough about this. Just ask or open the space to be able to discuss this if it is possible. A lot of times I wish I could hide my disability just because I can just see somebody's face drop when they just look at me. They only had me speaking, and when they had me speaking, they were speaking to somebody else, and then I appear in front of them, and some can't even hide. And you can just imagine what difference that it makes to the person with a disability. Or sometimes they just ask, what happened to you? Which is a very awkward question, because nothing happened. This is just who I am. And maybe part of that is accepting and opening up the discourse. And then we create space for all of us because we can. But it is very easy to lock the door completely for a person with a disability, just from just a look or surprise or shock, instead of asking. I think all of us are just as human, and we can talk about this and open the space. So I would really just encourage businesses and everybody else to even doubt ask, and at least do not lock or block the door. We can open keys for people with disabilities to fully participate as human as they are, as all of us. So that's what I would say, because I'm very convinced that we have a lot to offer, and we want space to be able to do that.
Thanks, Joyce. And I think last but definitely not least, we'll come to you, Amelia, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you. I think in terms of allyship, like educating yourself is really important. And I think I've definitely seen an increase in colleagues actually attending a lot of the sessions that our employee reps group for disabled people run. And it's also, I think myself, I know one aspect of my own individual disability, but someone who has exactly the same disability has a very different experience. So I think, I'm forever trying to learn, trying to understand, educate myself as well on, how disabilities impact other people. So yeah, I think it's just being sort of really open, keeping an open mind. And one of the big things we look at as well at the channel is the way we talk about things. So we don't use the word suffering, and we try and avoid kind of negative words when it comes to disability. We want to, somebody is living with their disability, and they're not suffering, and those kind of very sort of pity type words. And so we're quite careful in terms of not perpetuating those sort of stereotypes or using those tropes, and advocating for the person. It is part of their life, of course it is, but they are living with it.
Thanks, Amelia. I know that we are slightly over on time, but just before we wrap up, we've got a question here in the room in London, if that's okay. So I'm just going to pass over so that maybe I can ask it.
Hi, thank you to all the panelists. I just have one question. We often think the developed countries can teach the developing countries a lot because they have facilities. But what can you guys talk about mental accessibility and particularly to Joyce, what can developing countries teach us about disability that we so-called developed countries need to know? Because I think even without facilities, you can be a pretty good ally if you have the mindset.
I didn't quite get the question.
What can developing countries let's say developing countries who not necessarily have the facilities that we all talked about, the education, can teach us who are supposedly in the developed world about being an ally? Because I think if you have the right mindset, you can still be an ally even if you don't have the right facilities in place.
Yeah, I would really say there's a lot of low hanging fruit there in terms of what kind of support can be provided. And some of the things we have done actually is directly intervening in schools and trying to open spaces for people with disabilities. For example, most children with disabilities are not assessed, so they don't know they are in class and nobody knows what the problem is. And so we have supported some partners actually to go there and do assessments and actually train people to do assessments. Then when you know how exactly to approach that. Also, giving stuff like audiology labs and supporting those kinds of things. And for me, technology is really not a panacea, but the opportunities there are endless and those things are there. What you need is really access, and children who are visually impaired, for example, there is just so much that a computer can do, and offline and online, and there are some real possibilities there. So I think the opportunities don't lack, but sometimes the solutions that people themselves want, they don't speak to the people in developing countries because that is not the way they interpret it. There again, it is this allyship, partnership with the people there trying to figure out what can be done. Also, I found out for myself, because I work here, a lot of times people don't even know what is available. And until I left my country and went to another country and got a real big shock, because there's nothing I cannot do for myself. But immediately you enter the environment, there is so many handicaps. So I think technology is one of them. And I think opening opportunities for people to be able to go to school and learn and stay there, get quality education, opens untold opportunities. School is the one way that for me makes a very huge difference for those whose need is like that. And sometimes it is a step. Sometimes it is that the teacher has never dealt with a visually impaired person, so they panic and they don't know what to do, or it's just they're hard of hearing, and there are ways to do this. So I think there's a lot we can exchange, and the idea of allyship and asking and finding out what can be done. I think there are so many opportunities. We need to share more, and we need to open up the space more so that they can, people in developing countries can participate and not be blocked. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Joyce. I think that we're going to have to wrap up there because we are over on time. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for joining the panel. It's fantastic to hear from you all. I believe there's going to be a brief break now before Jessica Tagg is going to lead us into panel 3. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I think we're going to get started on panel 3 because of timing. So unfortunately, that means there won't be a break. Sorry about that. And I know that depending on the time zone you're in, that might mean it's quite late without a break. But thank you so much for joining for this panel. Before we get started, I believe we have a video from Michael Scrine, who is a partner in our entertainment and media team and also our responsible business partner. So I'm hoping we're able to show that video now before we get started.
Hello, I'm Michael Scrine, and I'm the responsible business partner for Reed Smith for the EMEA region, which basically means everywhere outside of the United States. I'm here to introduce the next panel session, and it's called Action Through Allyship. And it's about how businesses can become better allies. Now, there are a number of aspects of being a responsible business. One of them is pro bono, which is doing free legal work for good causes. We do quite a lot of that here at Reed Smith, as you may hear as the panel session goes on. And I'm the pro bono partner for EMEA, as well as being responsible business partner. So I'm very well aware of ways in which businesses can do so much to increase the focus on disability, inclusion, and representation. There are many opportunities for pro bono legal work to help charities and others achieve change. And I think you're going to hear quite a lot about that during this next session. And the session is about allyship. What can allyship do for people's good? It kind of speaks for itself. As we all know, unity makes strength. Well, we've got a great panel, and I hope and know that we'll all learn from listening to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael, for that video. And thanks again, everyone, for joining this panel. So this panel is going to be focused on, as Michael said, how businesses can be better allies. And we're specifically looking at how businesses can be allies through giving time, resources, and in the context of pro bono, legal skills in pro bono initiatives, community volunteering initiatives. And I think it's a really important thing to be thinking about because businesses generally have resources and they have time that they can spare and they have expertise and they have these skills. So it's a great way to be able to contribute to helping to improve the focus on disability inclusion and helping to support people with disabilities through supporting charities and community initiatives. So by way of introduction, I'm Jessica Tagg. I'm an associate in the pro bono team here at Reed Smith, helping to look after pro bono across Europe, the Middle East and Asia. And pro bono is free legal advice that we give to charities, non-profits and low-income individuals. Co-chairing this panel with me is Carol Mohegan, who I will let introduce herself.
Thank you, Jess. And good morning, good afternoon and good evening, depending on which time zone you happen to be in right now. As Jess has said, my name is Carol Mohegan. I am the responsible business manager for our Europe, Middle East and Asian offices, but I predominantly look after the activities that go on in our London and Leeds office. I manage our community outreach projects, which support some of the vulnerable areas in the community, our diversity, equity, inclusion student programmes, ranging from students in year 1 right up to year 13, so that's age 5 to 18. And also our charity fundraising activities. Just to mention that during this panel discussion, we will be talking about work experience and how that we should think about people with disability, young students with disabilities, the benefits that they would get of having work experience. And so we will be discussing that during this conversation. And I would now like to turn it over to our to our panelists, and perhaps they can all introduce themselves, starting with Felida.
Hi there. So yes, I'm Felida Swift. I'm the CEO of a charity called Face Equality International. We work to end the stigma, discrimination, or indignity experienced by people with facial disfigurements across the globe. A disfigurement is any mark, scar, or condition affecting facial appearance. I'll likely use the term facial difference interchangeably. In case you weren't already aware, as many people aren't, but that's okay. A severe disfigurement is what's enshrined in the UK Equality Act, but also there's legal protection in the US and in Australia and increasingly across the world as well. So we work as an alliance of organisations, also equally working with individuals to empower everybody to advocate for face equality on a local, national, international scale. We do this through our education programs, through our annual campaign Face Equality Week, and through our annual conference as well. We officially became a UK charity last year, which was a process which was massively helped by the support of Reed Smith. We've since become a United Nations accredited charity with consultative status to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Super excited to be here today to shed some light on the experiences of a community that often gets overlooked when it comes to the disability umbrella, but also to shout about the incredible partnership that we've had with both Reed Smith and Bank of America and the impact that that has had on our community. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Felida. I'm going to pass the mic over to Liz.
Hello, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Sheridan. I'm Associate General Counsel and Director at Bank of America, and I'm a lawyer working in the financial services industry. So I'm not the Bank of America D&I officer. I'm not even the lead of the very expansive disability app network at Bank of America, which is huge, is undertaking so many incredible initiatives. But I am somebody in legal who volunteers my time and expertise to help with pro bono initiatives and to engage in community volunteering. So I'm here today, certainly as an ally, and really looking forward to hearing more about what we can be doing in businesses as allies to help with D&I initiatives. So invited me to join you today.
Thanks, Liz. I'm going to pass the mic over to Alison now. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Alison Martin. I am Deputy Head Year of 11 in the Kingston Academy at our local secondary school. I work within inclusion and I support our SEND students with their further educational pathways and their career pathways. I mainly work with Year 10 and 11, supporting them with finding work experience, giving them the life skills for their next steps, and working with outside charities as well, with programs to support them within this process as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Alison. That's great. And last but by no means least, I'm going to pass it over to Richard. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Hi, everyone. It seems to be an all UK panel, which is completely wrong given the timing. I'm Richard Seeney, so I'm a transactional lawyer. I draft and negotiate contracts for construction projects in the UK, for infrastructure engineering projects worldwide. I've been at Reed Smith for 20 years. I've been a partner for 14 of those. I had been a member of our leaders' disability inclusion group at Reed Smith as an ally for years, until I discovered in my late 40s that I was actually autistic. And I now chair our nascent neurodiversity network as a subset of leaders.
Fantastic. Thank you, Richard. So let's get straight into the discussion. So my first question that I'm going to pass over to Alison and Felida, I'm going to do Alison first. How have you worked with businesses in the past to improve opportunities, improve inclusion, and provide assistance for people with disabilities? And Alison, would you mind going first?
Well, basically, when I'm actually looking for work experience for our SEND students, I will just be ringing local businesses, approach them whether they can help with offering work experience, and then explaining I support our SEND students and whether they can offer any opportunities for them. It really depends. I kind of approach companies and then find out what students I have that would be suitable for the roles, and then start sharing information after that. Obviously, I've worked with Reed Smith as well, through contacts through my head, which was probably the ideal scenario. Basically, we had a company come to us specifically saying they wanted to support students with disabilities, which made the whole process a lot more simpler than usual for me. And then I could then go find the correct students for those positions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alison. Handing it over to Felida.
Of course. So one of the key ways in which we work with businesses is through our education hub. So it's a purpose-built bank of resources which pulls together all of the expertise from across the sector. It's multilingual, it's targeted to key audiences like schools, like businesses, and that is a great way to advocate for the inclusion of the facial difference community across key sectors. We also have targeted specific training for businesses. So based on the duty of an employer to include people with disabilities, we build in all of the obligations in relation to someone with a disfigurement. So we run training on creating appearance inclusive workplaces. We do that both with kind of a specific lens. Sometimes it's quite bespoke. We've done that for PR companies who perhaps are working in advertising, where public facing representation is really important, but also we make sure that that covers HR, recruitment, making sure that we are all being upstanders in the workplace and reducing perhaps prejudice or microaggression in the workplace. And also we have worked with businesses such as Reed Smith on very specific projects, which I'll come to a little bit more later when we talk about the incredible research that Reed Smith did for Face Equality International.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to hand over to Jess for the next question.
Great, thank you. So yeah, I'm asking a question which is sort of on the flip side of that. So a question for Richard and Liz. You both work in big businesses. What community volunteering or pro bono work have you done, either personally or your organisations, to support people with disabilities? And I'm going to go to Liz first. Thanks.
Yes. So Bank of America, there's really broad array of activities and initiatives, pro bono and community volunteering that's open to employees. It's purposefully very broad, and the reason that is that then those that engage can engage in issues that we speak to them, and when we are taking part in something that that we're interested in and inspired by, then what we achieve through that it could be so much more significant. So within Bank of America, I think those efforts are multifaceted. There's there's obviously a focus on workplace training, giving our employees and teammates the skills to conduct themselves appropriately in the workplace, teaching individuals about their rights and the adjustments that may be owed to them, but also through our banking network and awareness of customers as well, and making sure that that what is offered to them is accessible, and then of course that in the wider communities. So what we aim to get back to the wider communities. So through Bank of America, there's there's the Disability Action Network that operates globally, but it's enormous. There's thousands of members, and so it's split out then into local chapters, and then also a virtual chapter. So there's lots of opportunities for allies and those who identify themselves as having disabilities to engage in that. Bank of America itself undertakes so many initiatives that the highest profile ones is the sponsorship for the Special Olympics. And there really are so many others, too many to speak about today, but I think a couple that maybe you're interested in. Just this week within London, there was an event at the National Portrait Gallery that I couldn't get a place on. It was so well attended, and it was a guided tour around the National Portrait Gallery, looking at how disability is represented within their collection, and I gather it was a really interesting, insightful, and a partnership with a charity called Art Lifted, which aims to introduce artworks within the Bank of America offices that are produced by artists with disabilities. And I'm checking my notes, but I think it's the 7th year in a row that Bank of America has achieved a top score in the Disability Equality Index. So well recognised for their activities in this space. For me personally, my introduction was through Reed Smith and Face Equality International. And I think, that itself, I think, is testament to how having opportunities can then lead to a deepening of engagement. So it was great, that opportunity to work with Face Equality International, and certainly it's increased my interest in issues that affect the community identified as disabled. So neurodiversity training and ways of ensuring that that I also interact in the workplace in a way that's respectful and inclusive, and aim constantly to educate myself about biases. And I think being at Bank of America has enabled me to do that, and given me the tools to enable me to do that.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And we were very glad to be able to partner with Bank of America too. So thank you. Richard, over to you.
And it's just, and I can't pretend to present to you a proper snapshot of the things that we as a firm have done. What I can do is talk to a few of the things that I myself have seen and done. So within the last year, within the last few months, we've taken on work experience of students, including through Alison at Kingston Academy. I had a neurodiverse student sit with me for a week. Well, she shared her time with me and Carol. Really, really fulfilling. From a graduate recruitment perspective, so we hosted an event this month run by MyPlus Consulting, who's a firm that we partner with, that helps us to be more disability aware. They were doing an event, and a number of disabled students came to our offices with the aim of increasing and simplifying and enabling access. So I was lucky enough to do the welcoming presentation. And it was really engaging to talk to the students during the networking afterwards to get their feedback and just how much they enjoyed the event and how much it helped to open their eyes. And then last on my list, so we undertake a number of pro bono projects, obviously. For example, we support a brilliant charity called Support Send Kids, which seeks to provide free legal advice to parents and carers of children with special educational needs and disabilities, to help them navigate what really is a very complex framework of overlapping laws around disability. Really hard for any non-lawyer. It's hard enough for qualified lawyers to navigate, let alone non-lawyers, let alone parents who may already be struggling with their disabled children, and a number of neurodiversities are or can be hereditary, so they may also be neurodiverse if their kids are neurodiverse. And yet the legal system is really prohibitive and restrictive. And I know I'm talking from a UK standpoint. I've also spoken to US colleagues who say the same thing. I think it's an inevitability. So So Support Send Kids runs a Q&A platform, and we're working with them to help answer questions, and a number of no nonsense guides to empower the parents, empower the carers to work out when they need to use lawyers, ideally not to have to use lawyers. And I mean, also one of the classic examples is some of your legal rights won't help you. They might help future use, but is it worth suing the school because you can't go to the prom? Well, no, because it won't help you get to the prom. They won't provide a resolution, but it may help others. So that kind of advice parents need. And it's through my relationship with Support Send Kids that earlier this month I found myself in a meeting with the UK Ministry of Justice, talking about how we can make the Court of Protection more accessible and improve access to justice for people with disabilities. It's just so empowering and so brilliant to see how you can really make an impact.
Thanks, Richard. I'll take the next question, which actually is going to be given to you, Richard, Alison, and Phillida. So I'm going to start with Richard, and the question is, how do you collaborate with each other to strengthen this work? What are the benefits of this collaboration in terms of the desired impact? And that's to you, Richard, first.
Sure. I mean, it's so useful to us and to the people we're seeking to benefit when the opportunity is targeted in a way that matches well with what we can offer. It does really make a difference. So we really do rely, for example, on the experience of people like Alison to identify appropriate opportunities for us to support students, work experience placements. And the neurodiverse student that I took on earlier this year was through the Kingston Academy and through Alison. So the Kingston Academy operates such a well-organized program. It provides tailored opportunities to the students, makes it really easy for businesses like Reed Smith to get involved.
Thanks, Richard. And given that you've just mentioned about Alison and Kingston Academy, I'm going to pass it on to Alison.
Yes, basically just when approaching businesses is finding out what they can offer, finding the student that does match, is tailoring that student for that position, not to overwhelm them. Basically, that's the hardest thing for me when I'm placing students, because a lot of the students we place in work experience are in year 10, so they're only 15, and to suddenly throw them into a position in a workplace will be so overwhelming for some students. So it's really finding the right place that we know that student will find comfortable. And obviously, just going back to the students that came to you, they were so grateful, and especially the parents were so grateful for them to have that opportunity, and the students benefited so much as well. For again, it's their kind of first step. They're now in year 12, and they'll be doing work experience again this year as well, and it will give them that confidence again to go into another place, have that on their CV as well. All goes towards their UCAS points, everything like that. So to have this opportunity, I mean, before I took this position specifically supporting our SEND students, SEND students were not going out on work experience. They weren't finding it. Very few people on our SEND register got work experience. By having me there and actually helping every single one, having a meeting with them, seeing what they actually would like to do, then finding that business where I feel they could fit in and would be giving them the opportunity to do so. So yes, it's good to have that that relationship with different businesses who are willing to offer these positions to our students. It just really will benefit them in the long run, basically.
Thanks, Alison. And can I just add on the back of what you just said, both you and Richard, the two students that we had, they were both 16, and they did, one did their placement in July and the other in August. And well, one, as Richard's already said, had neurodiversity. The other student had neurodiversity and physical disability. But what I can actually say is that they were absolutely amazing. They didn't let anything hold them back. They were so engaged into what they were doing. They were so committed and proactive, and they worked so well within the team. And what actually outshone as well, their age. I mean, Alison, I know you mentioned that, you know, a lot of your students are year 10, and these two students were year 11, so they were still quite young. But honestly, everybody said to me, you would never have believed they were only 16. They were so mature in their attitude and in their behaviour, and they so well wanted to do so well. You could just tell. I think when businesses are looking at work experience, even students who've got no disabilities, they're a bit wary of how do we introduce a work experience student into our organisation. You know, how can we make it interesting and fun and engaging and give them a good, you know, a good opportunity, give them a good time while they're there. So then if you add in a disability on top of that, it does make a lot of businesses shy away from the fact that they could actually open up a really good opportunity for somebody who has a disability, and actually that person can bring so much to the table, as well as, you know, a student who doesn't have. So I would definitely say, you know, especially Kingston Academy, anyone listening out there who's looking to do some work experience with students who have disabilities, Alison is definitely someone to get in contact with. And on that note, I'm going to just pass it over quickly to Flida.
Of course, yeah. So when it comes to the partnership that we've worked on with Reed Smith, we got double whammy, because when they kindly agreed to conduct a piece of legal research for us, they then brought Bank of America in, and I understand that there was colleagues of all sorts of different levels and areas of the business that were highly engaged in the project. So to give an outline of what the project was, we know that disfigurement is a globally neglected human rights issue. We know that discrimination is rife. We know that here in the UK, a third of people have been a victim of a hate crime. We also know that across the globe, where disfigurement and poverty are very much interlinked in a low to middle income country, we see the most extreme human rights violations, such as abandonment, children being hidden away, even caged, banned from attending school. I remember a previous panel talking about the importance of education. So we knew that there was an issue that was not being addressed. And we also wanted to understand, well, what is the legal recourse that might exist for someone with a disfigurement? Because we also knew that case law was very limited when it comes to discrimination claims. So we sought to understand what the gaps were. And what Reed Smith was able to do for us was look into the laws that exist in the UK, in the US, across Europe, and under the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The findings were both pioneering and demoralizing in equal measure, because there are lots of gaps. But this set us up with a baseline. This set us up as a new UK charity with a new strategy to position disfigurement as a human rights issue worldwide. And the response from the community when we launched this with an event was like so resoundingly positive. They saw us shining a light onto an issue that is very heavy, very full of jargon. It's incredibly difficult to understand. So it's with thanks to both of these organizations that we finally have a better understanding, and we have a starting point to start empowering more people to know their rights, but also to be informing policy well into the future, because we know this stuff is long game. So what has been done now will very much set us up for the future. And also just to add that in line with the partnership, it's gone far beyond the research as well. So Reed Smith have since facilitated 2 interns to come and work with us, both of which the team said, can we keep them, please, forever? So they've done an incredible job integrating into the team, one of which was a very specific project, a piece of market research that otherwise we never would have had the opportunity to do. It's one of those tasks that always falls to the bottom of the pile, and yet the impact that it has since had, again, on informing our strategy and setting us up for the future has been amazing. And we currently have a Reed Smith intern working with us, again, doing all the jobs, getting stuck in, coming up with innovative ideas, being that extra pair of eyes, and just adding so much value to us as a business. So we're incredibly grateful.
Thanks. If I could just jump in there as well, just to add on to Halida, to what you said. You mentioned the fact that we had a really big team working on the research with Bank of America lawyers as well. And I think that's a great thing to point out, because we are big organizations, we're big businesses, we have specific expertise. We also have lots of people who really, really want to help. And so we can help charities to capacity build. We shouldn't be the one driving the agenda. You can let us know what you need us to do, and we can bring the people power and help you to achieve the goals that you want to set out to do. So yeah, I think that's a great point. Sorry to jump in there.
And Liz, I'd like you to maybe wrap up on this question. As we've mentioned Bank of America a few times in this answer, would you like to put your advice in as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, really to echo what Philip and Jessica have said, in businesses, there's such a broad range of people with different lived experiences, different skill sets. And you know, if we take the face equality work as an example, we have lawyers who were employment specialists who were able to bring in lawyers from the US. So it's great that businesses are in that position to be able to do that. Lost.
I think we've lost Jess. Oh, there she's back.
Thanks. Sorry, I was trying to roll back to turn the lights on because they've gone off while I've not been moving in the room. Yes, thank you for that. And so I'm leading on the next question, and we've spoken about collaboration and the benefits that we get from that. How do we make sure that when we're collaborating, businesses and charities or community initiatives, that it is adding real positive value and it's making an impact, and it's not just a token gesture, or it's not businesses doing it for PR reasons? How do we make sure that that's the case? Felida, we can start with you.
Sorry. Of course, what I will say is that from the outset of the partnership, everyone was very much focused on the end point, the maximum impact, what was going to have the greatest benefit to the community, how can we really centre people's real life needs right now, not so much about how can we announce this to the world, which was that was really reassuring from the outset, that it wasn't focused on let's put a press release out about it. It was focused on what can we do to add value to your community. And there was a lot of back and forth as well. So we initially said, let's conduct a piece of research. And then there was this massive document, which was still incredibly difficult to understand. So what we went back to the team to say was, well, could we turn this into some simplified fact sheets, which are broken down country by country with a glossary to make sure that all of this legal jargon is as simplified as possible. So again, that back and forth, the constant consultation, it was very evident that the teams that we were working on this piece of research were very invested in the best possible outcome, as opposed to simply shouting about it. So that was really promising.
Great, thank you. And Liz, do you want to come in on this one as well?
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting topic. I suppose and it was really interesting to hear. I think it was Philip's comments in one of the earlier panel sessions. I suppose I come from this thinking that you know, if you put aside the token gesture part for now, that PR and making a difference aren't mutually exclusive, and actually that it's the PR side that the profile can be given to successful community engagement or pro bono initiatives. Actually that can drive momentum, and you know, we see certainly that that through, you know, because of PR, you find that there are, you know, there's shareholders who expect companies to be active and to be showing that they have meaningful D&I initiatives. So this shareholder activism, when we look to engage law firm partners, one of the questions that we will ask is about their diverse and inclusive cultures and how they're achieving that. So I think not hopefully to get dispirited by an element of successful PR and see that hopefully as something that shows how important these questions are. In terms of tokenism, I guess, you know, I suppose it's having meaningful long-term partnerships as well. These will more often than not be short-term gains. I mentioned some of the tie-ins that Bank of America has, and they've been long held, and they deepen. And funding, you know, there's real funding that is dedicated to promoting those efforts. So that goes beyond tokenism, I think. In the financial services industry, there's lots of really interesting discussions in this space. So there's recent consultation about and from the lens of a financial services regulator, considering how cultures that are not diverse can often fall victim to poor decision making. So when you have a diverse and inclusive culture, people feel empowered to speak up. That can lead to better decision making and challenges to poor decision choices. So our regulators, both the financial services regulators and the Sisters Regulation Authority, recognise that. And then I finish on tokenism. I mentioned to Phillida that, you know, it's a very, in some ways, you know, it's a smaller win, but with face equality. Phillida educated us about Halloween and how we should think of the choices that we make for costumes, and I think the face equality campaign that My Scar is Your Halloween Costume was so effective. Something that I've never thought about before, and you know, and it fills me with horror that you know, that in the past, because of an uneducated decision, that I could have caused upset to unwittingly. So you know, as a kind of small you know, I'm now aware of that, and it's something that I try and educate my family, my friends in the same way. So even those small interactions can have big consequences and improve and create improvements.
Thank you. Yeah, and I love that point about PR being potentially a force for good as well, particularly when you're working on something that requires advocacy. So thank you. Alison, over to you.
I don't think this is a bit more from my side for a bit difficult to answer, because I'm within the school environment. I'm working with students, so I think I will leave that question. Sorry.
Sure, no problem at all. Richard?
Yeah, all I was going to say was tokenism just doesn't work. It's so important to have positive experiences on both sides. If it's not meaningful, from our perspective, you just won't get the volunteers, you won't get the participants. And when we're talking in this context about pro bono and volunteering, about partnering with people for the force of good, and you know, our people vote with their feet, choose the initiatives that matter to them. You know, sometimes we get an opportunity in for a client and we have to sell it. I mean, we've got really, really good pro bono participation, but we've also got some really, really good opportunities. And people pick and choose what they want to do. That we have to sell our opportunities to garner enough interest. Sometimes they're just not perceived to be meaningful enough, and we have to turn around and say, look, I'm really sorry, we haven't been able to get enough participation. It's inevitably the impact of the work that is the differentiator. Anything that's just ticking a box and isn't worthwhile, isn't making a difference, it won't get off the ground.
Thanks, Richard. And leading off of that answer to that question, on the topic of avoiding token gestures, and this is not my opinion, this is just a question I'm putting out there, and maybe the audience may be thinking this. If a business takes on a handful of SEND students for work experience per year, isn't that just a drop in the ocean? Is it really worthwhile? And like I said, this is not really my opinion, but I'd be interesting to hear the answers from Alison and Richard. I'll turn to Alison first.
I think every little helps, basically, to be honest with you, and just having that relationship, you know, if businesses had that relationship with schools, first of all, could offer 1 or 2 places a year, it makes all the difference to us. Also, you know, just when they're having the relationship, you know, coming in, talking to the students, having those career fairs, so they can see what is actually what opportunities they have, is a massive bonus for our students. And, you know, mentoring, things like that, getting involved with charities who do programs for students who rely on businesses to be part of their program. So we're working with a couple of programs at the moment where our students will be mentored by people within a company. They will get a chance of work experience. They will have career interviews with them, and all of that over a period of 2 years, which is a really good program we have got going already for our students, which will be of major benefit for our students. So it's the longevity, even if it's just, like I say, 1 or 2 positions a year, it does make all the difference.
Thanks, Alison. And just before I pass it over to Richard, that gives me an opportunity to do a quick plug, as you mentioned, Careers Fair. So on the 7th of December, which is next Thursday, we are hosting a student disability career fair focused on students with disabilities, that's visible, non-visible, neurodiversity and mental health, from age 16 plus. So that can be students, young people at university, people who are looking for employment, job changes, etc. All are welcome. And we will have some clients there. It'll be running from 12 till 2, so just for a couple of hours. And we're hoping to have a good attendance if possible. So anyone out there listening, if you know of any students or young people who may be interested in finding out a little bit more from a variety of organisations who are what we would like to call ourselves disability friendly, then please come along on Thursday, the 7th of December at 12 o'clock. And I'll pass over to Richard.
Thanks, Carol. So, I mean, yes, it is good to offer the opportunities to individual students. It does make a difference to their lives. And yes, in doing that, we're having some impact in the needed societal changes. You know, if every employer did their bit, then we'd be together making a real difference. In my view, the biggest benefit to us is something different. Basically, it's the difference between learning about something and putting it into practice, right? So it doesn't matter how many educational videos our employees watch. Our people don't become disability aware unless they're actually in contact with and working with people with disabilities. You know, we need to practice, we need to confront our preconceptions. We need to get into the habit of doing it and of learning from it. You know, there's a massive, relatively untapped pool of people with disabilities who could be fantastic employees, but you actually need to get into the practice of working with them and giving work experience to disabled students so our employees can see them and interact with them. It's actually a really good way of doing that. It's not the only way, but it helps.
Thank you. And I know we did want to touch on the benefits that businesses get through doing these pro bono and community initiatives. We are quite pushed for time, so I think unfortunately we'll have to sort of skip over that one. But if anyone in the audience has any questions, then feel free to put them in the chat and we may be able to come back to them during the closing remarks. But just to wrap up this session then, one final question for Phillida and for Alison. What more could businesses be doing in this space to be an ally through pro bono initiatives or community volunteering initiatives? And I'll turn to Alison first. Thanks.
I think, again, is what I was just saying, basically offering the work placements to the students, supporting local schools, doing those career fairs, coming in, talking about your business. We have interventions for our SEND students where we do give them life skills to prepare them for the workplace, coming in and having to talk then. Again, there's lots of charities that do offer programs, offer it to lots of schools. Again, be part of those, and just you know, adapting the way you interview, the job role, the obviously environment, but even down to the hours and things like that, that works around different people's kind of needs.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And Felida?
Of course. So I guess this is the time to give a shameless plug to what we can offer to businesses, which is our training program, all about creating appearance inclusive workplaces, both for colleagues and for HR professionals. But of course, we would love to work with businesses. As Richard rightfully put, it's not just about the training. You have to actually meet people. You have to see visible difference. You have to have that interpersonal connection. We're always looking for businesses that want to run collaborative campaigns or projects that will shift societal attitudes, but also there may well be businesses that do have pro bono hours, or they can offer interns that can help us to make our small but mighty charity run even better than it already does. And I guess if you're a valuable 500 signatory, as Reed Smith is, we, amongst a whole bunch of other charities within this space, can help you to make good on those promises that you've made as part of the valuable 500. So come and speak to us if you've got any ideas about ways in which to make face equality a reality.
Fantastic. Thank you for ending our discussion, Felida. I am very conscious of time. It's been, I know that everyone who's on has been here for quite a while. So I'm going to, before I pass it back to Carolyn for the closing remarks, I would just like to say a huge thank you to all our speakers, Felida, Richard, Elizabeth and Alison, and also a big thank you to my co-chair, Jess, for chairing this panel. I hope you've enjoyed the panel discussion, and handing it back over to Carolyn for the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol and Jess, for that. And thank you to all of our speakers on that final panel, which was extremely interesting and educational. And as I've been listening today, I've just made a note of a few of the words which I heard actually the most often, or which struck me the most often. And one of them was education. I heard that in pretty much all of the panels, and the need for it, and the focus on that for people with disabilities. Collaboration was another word I heard often, and the need for allyship and collaboration for people to work together with other people. And then opportunity was a word I heard very often. Both the opportunities that are now being brought by things like emerging tech, but also the hunger that people with disabilities have to be given opportunities, and to be supported with those opportunities. I was also very struck by Stuart Pixley's emphasis on listening and learning, and listening to people and learning from them. And I think that's something I think we probably all need to do more of, but it's something we've definitely all been doing today. So I'll just finish by saying thank you all so much for attending. Thank you to all of our speakers and hosts, and who brought a huge range of perspectives here from very many different industries. And of course, it'd be very remiss of me not to mention and to thank the person who's behind all of this work, Vaibhav Adlakar. He hasn't spoken today, but he has been here supporting everything and has been the architect of this incredible summit. So I know we'll be doing it again next year, so look forward to seeing you all again then. Thank you so much.